Hey everyone, welcome back to Kevin Reviews. Again, I just want to address that these decorations behind me are mainly for any reviews I do on horror or Halloween related. So um, I don't want to I don't want to pull them down to have them put them up again for any of the future reviews. Um, for that. So in any case, yeah, and this is just going to be normal lighting. This is for just a regular movie this time, as I had watched the 2004's The Punisher. This is directed by Jonathan Hensley, written by Jonathan Hensley as well. I think Jonathan Hensley also wrote for films Armageddon, and also wrote several episodes for the Young Indiana Jones TV series, which I've never seen. I remember hearing about, but that's my understanding anyway. I don't know what else he directed that didn't really stand out, but I think he's more often than not a writer. It's also written by Michael France, and then we have a cast including Thomas Jane, John Travolta, Laura Haring. I have to look at this. Ben Foster, John Pinette, and Rebecca Romajan. Romajan, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but she was the Mystique in the X-Men films, the first three X-Men films at least. So, yeah. Um, I did not see this in theaters. I remember it getting pretty mixed reviews, mostly negative reviews from critics, kind of mixed for audiences. They weren't sure about the Punisher. I knew nothing before then who the Punisher was, other than he didn't seem like your typical superhero. He was just more of like a vigilante, um, you know, dealing revenge or dealing with his own brand of justice, which is basically kill anybody that that sinned or whatever. So I do remember seeing this though about New Year on the new with this New Year's Eve, uh, 2004, where I was at a party. It was a sports team party. It was for my I was in high school. I was on the high school wrestling team, and we were doing a Halo 2 party. And all when we were kind of tired of Halo 2, we had a couple movies. One was like the new guy with Ryan Reynolds, and then I think that was the title. And then of course there's the Punisher. I remember liking the Punisher then, but then this was late. It was like an all nighter New Year's Eve thing. So I didn't remember a ton, but I think the one thing I got out of it that I distinctly remembered was one of my team members. There was like a short little scene involving a woman's bare chest, and of course he shot out in the delivery, the T word. I'm not going to say it here, but if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. But um, and that was it was just kind of funny. We laughed, all of us laughed, so that's kind of where things went. But in any case, going back to the Punisher, yeah, I don't know a ton about the Punisher in the comics, other than what he was. I he did kind of come across as like not technically Batman because he's not rich, but you know what happens, high tally, what happens when you know the death of of family members, of persons, people you love, um, are basically taken away. And granted, for Bruce Wayne, that was when he was a kid. This is Frank Castle as an adult. So where does he, and of course he does cross that line and just starts killing people that just wrong anybody. Um, but in any case, I have seen this before. I do actually still remember liking it, and it's kind of one of those underrated films. It didn't, it's not quite as talked about, and it's still kind of a mixed bag on whether or not this is an actually good Marvel film or it's a bad Marvel film. And it kind of teeters on both sides, unfortunately, and that no one really knows what to make. I also want to mention that the Punisher was produced by Lionsgate Films, so not 20th Century Fox, like the past films before it. So, but yeah, I rewatched it again, and here's my review of The Punisher 2004. So in The Punisher 2004, Frank Castle is an ex FBI agent who just recently got done with you know, a sting operation, undercover sting operation that, while it was successful, it involved the death of a son of mob boss Kingpin named Howard Saint, played by John Travolta. Um, and yeah, Frank Castle was played by Thomas Jane. I forgot to mention that. I think so. He didn't think anything about it, but he decides that he needs to. He's going to be moving with his family, and decides to go to have a family reunion event in different location, Puerto Rico, I believe it was. Unfortunately, Howard Saint finds out where he is and who he is and where he is, and he orders a hit on Frank Castle. But of course, the added bonus is where his wife Laura Harding, played by who plays Livia Saint, the wife of Howard Saint, says kill his family basically. So they sent the hit. He sent his Howard Saint sent his goons, and his family is massacred. It does his wife and kid, his own parents, aunt, uncles, niece, nephews, everyone's killed. Um, and yet he somehow survives despite being mortally wounded. So now he's back after some amount of time. He's back, and now he takes his revenge, or in this case, punishment, out on Howard Saint and his goons, basically. So, and that's basically the premise. I will say that I'm still having a hard time judging whether I not like this or not. I think it is good. I think it is good for the most part. It's not it's not like top 10 out of non MCU films that or in top 10 non MCU films. Um, because I think the one thing is this is a revenge story, and if you take Marvel and the Punisher out of the equation, it is just your typical um, revenge story that frankly doesn't feel all you know, superhero at all. And maybe that's one of the problems this film faced, is that it is kind of tonally inconsistent. But I frankly didn't mind it. It kind of, based on what it was going for, or I think it's going for, is like a film noir western type thing. Because um, I don't know. There's moments or inclinations that it tries to be that, with some like the lighting for the film noir, even though it's not in black and white. And some of the westerns, like even involving like one or two shootout scenes. So there's that. I think even the music, especially, is kind of fitting the film noir western vibe um, a bit. I can't really go explain it because I'm probably not the best to um, explain certain things like that. Especially with the music, because I don't know I think it's like trumpets or something like that. Almost, I don't remember. I don't know. I'm probably not the best expert on that. Um, but I don't know. I kind of I didn't mind the tone so much, but then again, this is a guy who would is dealing out punishments in a very gruesome way, and there's not a ton of gruesomeness to it, but there are moments for sure. But it does at times seems like it's held back a lot. Um, you know, because they want to find an audience, as well as try to stay faithful to the comics, but they don't want to like go over the top gory, um, which I think is supposed to be part of the Punisher's character. I could be wrong because I have never read the comics. Um, the Punisher comics in the first place, other than I just know his origin story, or at least parts of the origin story. And there was, I remember reading some comments after the film was over that that the origin story changed. It wasn't his entire family was killed. It was just his wife and son, or something like that. They they were killed differently. I think it works here. Actually, it kind of gives him more human. It's like what would we put in Frank's situation? Would we have done what Frank did if our entire family were killed by a mob boss's goons and whatever, and we would take our revenge? Because that seems like the last resort is we take our revenge, with nothing left to lose. So it explores that for a bit. I think Thomas Jane as Frank Castle is perfect in the role. He really does a great job as Frank Castle, Punisher. He's even gotten some really great lines and moments. He even does his own action scenes. There's one action scene involving the Russian where he fights Kevin Nash from the former WWE wrestler. And there's even a moment where I think some know, or most people know, or maybe none of, or some of you don't know. There's a scene where, a part where he stabs Kevin Nash with a knife, but it happens to be a real knife, and Kevin Nash was wounded on the set, but he took it like it was nothing, and it was very impressive. And it's still impressive to watch that particular scene where we see, you know, Thomas Jane go through all the stunts when there could have been a stunt double. He just decided to do it himself, or majority of the stuff himself. So there's that. Trying to think. John Travolta as Howard Saint. I think he did fine. Um, I think, granted, people kind of thought of him as cartoony, and I didn't really see him as cartoony. I think he did well. It was, fine performance. It wasn't over the top. It was kind of in the middle between over the top and being serious. I think he mostly tried to keep it very serious. But that's just me. Action scenes are fun. They're not. There's not quite a ton of it, or some of them just kind of start and end pretty quickly. So there's not, very many moments. Extreme moments are very, um, other than like there's one torture scene that's pretty, wincing. Though they cut away from that, because that's the thing. They cut away from pretty a lot of intense scenes. Um, that should be intense but isn't intense. But yeah, I think it's just, maybe it's studios, maybe it's direction. I'm not sure exactly, but it did feel like it wanted to try to be a Punisher movie, but it had to be restrained so it could fit with a general audience. Um, for people who at least know the Punisher, and maybe some people don't know the Punisher or don't want to, like, think something like this, even for a Marvel film, should not be associated with, like, Spider-Man or Blade or Hulk or the X-Men, where there's superpowers and stuff like that, where there's just this guy with guns. Um, so yeah, and that's probably its downfall. It didn't do successfully. I mean, I think it actually was a success. It just didn't, like, the reviews and criticisms about it, or probably worldwide sales did not meet demand. So there was no Thomas Jane did not appear in the sequel. Punisher Warzone, which I'm not sure is technically a sequel, but it is. Um, but it kind of feels sort of like it. Um, and I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it before. I will get to that later. So, and then of course there's some new characters. I mean, I mentioned Livia, which fine. There's a Howard Saint's men, Quentin Glass, who played by Will Howard, and he does fine as well. There's these three neighbors that become kind of Frank Castle's unofficial family, even if he wants to deny it. There's like even kind of a sort of love interest or this woman named Joan, played by Rebecca Romijn, who seems to want to help Frank or make him better, or think I can help you, kind of help you, and whatever. Ben Foster is like you know has these piercings and whatnot. And then we have you know uh, Bumpo, played by John Panette, who just kind of is the fat guy, the stereotypical kind of fat guy. But I mean, so there's not a ton of character in here, but there are good moments, and that's another thing, because the way the tone is, it does try to insert some comedy or in the film, with from mainly Bumpo and Dave, played by Ben Foster, with the one with the piercings. Um, and I think sometimes it works, other times it's kind of falls flat, but it didn't really bother me or make me angry, or kind of like say this is not the Punisher I'm looking at, or that I feel like should be. I don't know. I just kind of treat it like its own thing, like as a kind of a window, or for a way for Frank to, it's like an open window for to find a better life through these new friends that could be considered family, in a way, a new family for him, that he cares about. So I mean, I didn't mind that. So um, is there anything else? I think if I have to say, the pacing can be a bit sluggish at times. There are some silly moments. Um, like there's one hitman who's supposed to resemble Johnny Cash, and it's kind of cool, but then it kind of falls flat. There's even work. He even works on this own car, like, which doesn't make sense, because it's like it's used once and never used again. Um, you know, and I think it could have been used late in the film if it wanted to. Um, some of the effects or explosions don't exactly hold up nowadays, or just either downright silly. Um, let's see. And I also think the other reason is the film doesn't make sense story structure wise, because there's not a ton of moments where we because we don't know exactly how Howard Saints found Frank Castle in the first place, or exactly where he is. We're just kind of we're supposed to say he just has connections. He knows where he is, where they are, where he is and whatnot. They don't really explain it too well, and I do feel like there was a lot more scenes in the film that just got cut out because for time, and frankly, they could have used that. They could have used the scenes, because it does feel like um, moments were cut, and it wasn't like it didn't connect quite well, or whatever. So yeah, that's my thoughts. There's also the origin of the skull shirt, which frankly is kind of silly, um, because according to the kid, it's supposed to ward off evil spirits, which it is. If that wards off evil spirits, that must be, that's way off, in my opinion. But it's, I don't know. I think if I would have to give it a rating, I would give it three 3 stars, maybe 3.5 stars. I think 3 stars is it. I think it is what it is. It's a mixed bag. It's in the middle of the road. I do think it is underrated, that you at least should check it out, because I think it is worth a watch. It's not gory. It's not hugely action packed. Nothing really superhero stands out superhero wise. Um, but I think for some of the action scenes, some good moments in the writing, as well as Thomas Jane as the Punisher, I think you're going to have a good time with it enough. But it's definitely not like top 10 of the non MCU films, in my opinion. But I think it is worth a watch. So, but what are your thoughts on the Punisher 2004? Give a like or dislike on the review. Leave it in the comments below. what your thoughts are. Please subscribe to my channel and click the notification bell so you can so whenever I put out a review. And I will see you guys in the next review. Bye.